Hello everybody, Mike Brailsford with Brailsford Woodworks. Thank you for joining me back in my shop today. I do appreciate it. Today, I'm going to talk about what it takes to get into turning. And what I mean is the must-haves versus the should-haves, and then the nice-to-haves. And with that, let's get started. All right, so let's start with the absolutely must-haves. If you want to get into lathe turning, wood turning, this is what you absolutely have to have. Number one, obviously, you got to have a lathe. Now, it can be a very big investment, or you can look around and do some things, and it might not be as big an investment. But if you're not sure this is something you want to do, there are places where you can take a class. With us in North Carolina, where I am, the Klingspor woodworking stores give classes in wood turning. You could try it that way and see if it's something you want to get into. Or the best way is if you had a friend who could show you, try it, see if you like it. I'm sure there's places that have adult education programs that may have wood shops you can try and see if it's something you really want to invest in. If you want to try it and you're willing to put some money into it, there's certain things you could try. Harbor Freight's lathes are surprisingly not bad for a beginner. I bought my son the Harbor Freight Benchtop lathe. I think you can do, I think it'll do 10 or 12 inches. I'm not 100% sure. But it comes with, a faceplate. It comes with a spur drive. It comes with a live center. It comes with what you need to get a basic start. Other choices are Rickon makes a benchtop model, a couple benchtop models. One, it's a manual speed change by changing the belt pulleys. They also have some variable speed ones, which are a bigger investment. I think you can get to the Rickon benchtop models for about $400 for the manual turning, manual speed control, versus about $700 if you want to get to an electronic speed control. Also, that Harbor Freight lathe is, I think it's $269 for their benchtop model. Their big stationary one, I'm not exactly sure how much that one is. But it's a bigger investment, but far less than about any other full-size lathe you can buy, or midi lathe as it might be. From the benchtop models, obviously you can jump up to the midi size lathes, and you get into something with that'll turn, a 12-inch, maybe a 14-inch bowl. Some of them are mount on a bench, but some of them also are freestanding. And, obviously those are going to require a little bit more of an investment. Then after that, you can go to a full-size lathe, like my Laguna Revo or my American Beauty. Obviously a far bigger investment. My current income now includes, stuff I'm making with my lathe, so I consider it an investment in my business. But, that requires, you got to be serious about it. Ironically, I did, my wife and I had bought some insurance recently, and the guy who was the insurance salesman had told me he had just gotten into wood turning, and it was only like 6 months before, and went out and bought himself the most top-of-the-line Powermatic, a bunch of tools he had to have dropped in one shot, 10 grand in lathe and accessories, just by just trying it and deciding he liked it and really wanted to jump in with both feet. If you can do it, I guess, what the heck. But more power to him. So I would say that with wood turning, depending also on what you want to do, some lathes are more designed for bowl turning versus spindle turning, and you have to really figure out what it is where you want to focus And once you get into it further, you know, buy the lathe that works for you for that aspect of turning. After you get your lathe, number 2 is going to be safety equipment. That is the absolute must-have before you do anything. Before you turn your lathe on, you must have safety equipment. The biggest piece of safety equipment you can have is a face shield. Not safety glasses, a face shield. And the reason is because you're working with pieces of wood. Some of them have voids, some of them have cracks. Things can happen. A piece of wood can basically disintegrate on your lathe and come flying and hit you in the face. There are plenty of horror stories on the internet for you to look up to figure out whether, you know, I'm telling the truth or not. They've had people whose orbital bones around their eyes have been shattered. You know, the facial bones been broken. There's been people killed by pieces of wood flying off the lathe. It's you know, it's something you need to be cognizant of. So starting out, first and foremost, number 1 piece of safety equipment is a face shield. Secondly, you need some kind of dust protection. When you're sanding on a lathe, it will produce a prodigious amount of dust. I have 2 things I use. I have my RZ dust mask that I can use. It opens up like this. Goes on like that. If you want to, and that's fine for the most part, but if you want to go a little bit further, or you're more sensitive to dust and you have the ability, the next step will be something like this. This is a Trend Air Shield Pro. It's got a battery in it. It's got a fan that keeps positive pressure inside the mask. It's got a hood that seals around your head, and the fan is sucking in from up above and then blowing out around your face, so dust can't get in because of the positive pressure with inside the mask. Nice to have. But in the safety equipment, some kind of dust protection is the must-have. So number 3 on the list will be, I'm putting all of the tools into one category, and that on the must-haves. Now, when I got into it, I bought a kit on Amazon, and there were these kind called Savannah, and it came with, I think it came with 2 SKUs. I'm just showing you the one. Came with a parting tool, came with a spindle gouge, a spindle roughing gouge. It came with a pathetic bowl gouge, which I would never use on a bowl, by the way. It came with a V tool, and let's see, I think that's about it. It's garbage. It's absolutely not worth the money to buy the cheap kits like on Amazon. If you buy a $60 6 or 8 piece lathe kit, it's worth about $10. You can't sharpen it enough. The steel isn't strong enough, and it's really not worth the money. It is absolutely worthwhile to step up just a little bit. This SKU that I have is made by Hurricane Woodturning Tools. They're a little bit more expensive, not a lot, a little bit, and they are worth the extra money. Or if you want to get a multi-tooled kit, Robert Sorby makes them. Robert Sorby tools are very good. I recommend them. Crown Tools makes a set. They're also very good. You're going to spend more money for them, but you definitely are going to get what you pay for. The other route is to buy some individual tools. If you want to get started right with a decent set and buying them individually, you can start with a decent SKU that you could get from like Hurricane or from Sorby or Crown or any number of other manufacturers. And you could spend a little bit more money. Thompson Lathe Tools, you have to order them online, but they are absolutely spectacular. So I would get a skew. I would get a bowl gouge like this. This is a Thompson Lathe Tool bowl gouge. If you're going to do any spindle turning, you could get a spindle roughing gouge. Now, just so you know, everyone says this, and I'm going to say it also, spindle gouges and bowl gouges are very, very different. You never use a spindle gouge on a bowl. It is a recipe for disaster and will likely get you hurt. The reason is that the metal that these are made out of is very, very thin. Because of the stresses of the wood, the way they're turning on a spindle is completely different than the way they are turning on a bowl. It cannot take the pressure that it takes when the end grain comes swinging around. It cannot take that and can and will snap right here. And then you have this piece of metal flying in the air, probably at your face. Whereas a bowl gouge, it's a solid rod of metal down here and absolutely can take the pressure. So, a skew, a bowl gouge, and I would say probably a scraper. This was a little bit nicer scraper. It's made by Crown Tools. It's a bowl scraper, and is a little bit more money. But again, you could get away with maybe 4 tools to start with. You'd spend a little bit more than you would for a moderately priced set, but you'll end up starting with a collection of lathe tools that you can build on. And the better the tool, the more interest I think it will spark in you, because you'll get more enjoyment out of using a fine tool than a bad tool or even a mildly mediocre tool. They hold their edge better, and they're just going to work. You're going to get more enjoyment out of it because you're not going to feel like you're fighting the wood rather than turning it and getting a decent cut. The last item I have on my absolutely must-have list for turning is some way to sharpen the tools. What a lot of people who just get into turning don't realize is you have to sharpen a lot. I mean a lot. I'm turning a big cherry burl bowl right now, and it has a lot of resin in it. And I have found that I am sharpening on this almost as much as I do when I turn pecan, which is a way harder wood. But at any rate, it depends on the wood you're turning and how often you have to resharpen. But you will have to resharpen. An average bowl I turn, I will sharpen 1, twice, maybe 3 times. Sometimes more, depending on the species of wood. And turning with a sharp tool versus a dull tool, it will make all the difference in the world in your enjoyment and how much fulfillment you're getting out of what you're doing. A dull tool, you'll just be fighting it, you'll be frustrated, and you won't like it at all. Keeping it up, keeping it sharp, will pique your interest, and you will stay with it. So for sharpening, there's lots of choices. There's a Tormek system, which is a water-cooled grinding wheel. They're very expensive, but you will get an unparalleled edge on them. I don't have one of those. So what I actually have is I have Ricon's low-speed grinders, and I have 2 of them. And I've bought CBN wheels. Now, CBN wheels are impregnated diamonds on the wheels and are far better than a regular stone wheel. I started out with one grinder, and I've now expanded to two, but I've got a 60 grit, a 150 grit, a 350 grit, and a 600 grit. I've only just gotten the grinder with the 350 and 600 grit, and I'm finding the 600 is somewhat challenging to grind with. There's a lot more friction, and because of it, the tools will burn a little easier. So I've been experimenting with it, trying to get it right. But certainly the 150 grit is everything you really would ever need in order to, and I've used it for a long time now, a couple of years. Will get you a finely sharpened gouge that you can work with easily. So that is my list of the must-haves. Now I know there's someone out there screaming, what about a chuck? Well, a chuck is, I put it in the #1 position of the should-have, but it's not a must-have. You can turn a bowl without a chuck. A little more challenging, and if money is an object, you can do it. What you can do is you can mount a faceplate. Like I said, most lathes come with a faceplate. You can mount a faceplate to a sacrificial block and glue that to your bowl blank. And then you can turn it, and at the end you part it off, and there you go. You're all done. You just sand it with a hand sander, the bottom, and you're good to go. But when we move into the you should have, I would put a chuck right there at the top of the should have list. It makes it far more easy to do so many things. You can get different jaws to do different things like that if you want to expand what you have with your chuck. But mainly, holding a bowl with a chuck is way easier than doing it any other way. You can either turn yourself a little tenon, or as they say overseas, a spigot, or a mortise. And so if you have a tenon, the chuck is going to grab it from the outside. If you have a mortise, it's going to go in and expand out, and it'll hold it that way. There's pluses and minuses to doing it either way, and I use either one of them depending on what the bowl blank is like and how I'm going to shape it. Most chucks, when you buy them new, will come with a wormwood screw. Like this is one of my bigger chucks, and it came with this wormwood screw. What you can do is it'll mount in here, and when you start by shaping the outside of the bowl, you'll drill a little hole in the middle, and you literally just screw the blank right onto this, and it stays rather nicely, and you can shape the outside of your bowl before you move on to putting it and hollowing it out. Another thing you can get for a chuck is what they call coal jaws, and that's this big plate. This one is a jumbo coal jaw. It's the biggest one I could find around here, at any rate. This will do a 15 or 16 inch bowl, and what you do is when you've turned your bowl and you want to finish the bottom, it will hold the bowl on face first against the plate, and we'll grab it with these rubber bumpers, and you can finish off the bottom. Always recommend using a tailstock when you're doing that. It'll hold it in place, and you can either take your tenon off if you have one, or finish shaping it and maybe adding some bottom details. Sometimes I add a V-groove or two. It's just gives some a visual nicety to the finished work. So another should have is sandpaper. You should have this. Not necessary to get through anything. You can leave them rough. You can turn them, leave them rough, and let them be. But you know what? You really should have some sandpaper. It'll take the rough burrs off. It'll make it look a lot nicer. I use both paper, cloth back sandpaper, and mainly I use discs. I use 3-inch and 2-inch discs. I start out with a 60 grit, and I work from there. I go 120, 150, 180, 220, 320, and 400 is where I top out. I even have some higher grits that I go to for certain things, depending on what it is. I can go up to 10,000 grit, but it's usually kind of rare. I also have some polishing compound that I use if necessary. But you know, it's a should have, not a must have to turn. It's a should have. One of the next things I would put in the it's in the should have list probably, if you can swing it, is a bandsaw. So a bandsaw will give you a lot of versatility in preparing your bowl blanks. So a lot of places you go, wood stores, Woodcraft, Klingspor, any of the other ones, the bowl blanks are going to come square, and you can take a circle guide and draw yourself a circle, and if you have a bandsaw, you can cut it into a circle before you put it on your lathe. That will save you, first off, depending on the size of the blank, it'll make it so it'll fit on your lathe, or it'll help wear and take down the wear and tear on your tools because you're knocking at least the edges off. You can do the same thing, knocking the edges off a bowl blank with a chop saw. I've done that. You get an octagonal shape, and it's not as nice as starting with a completely round one, but I've done it. It's fine. But it all depends on what you can swing. A bandsaw can take up some space. A lot of people already have a chop saw, so you can go either way with that. Now we'll get into some of the nice to haves. Some of the nice to haves are like variations in tool rests. My Robust comes with this one as standard equipment. It's it's about a foot long, and it's a straight footrest. Tool. It's a straight tool rest, and it's very nice because it's got a stainless steel rod on the top and things like that. I also bought the smaller, was this 4 or 5 inch? Because I do a lot of small things too, like Christmas ornaments and things like that. So the 14-inch tool rest will get deep into a hollow form, and to be able to extend my reach deeper to get be able to make deeper vases or hollow forms, and that will be, again, a nice to have. One of the next nice to haves is a sander. You don't have to have it. You can certainly sand by hand. Another nice to have will be double-ended calipers. If you're working on a bowl, you can reach in and grab it on this end, and it'll tell you what the thickness is here. And it usually comes in 2 different shapes. Depending on where you are, you can reach in better with one side or the other. Another nice to have is a drill chuck. This goes onto the tailstock, and you can use it to drill out. I use it to drill out hollow forms to get them started. You can drill down in and then pull it out, and then it gives you a nice head start to work from. Another nice to have is a threaded live center, and what you use this for is you can mount a chuck on this and mount it into the tailstock. And what I've used this for is when I made segmented turning and I need to join a top onto a bottom that I've already done, I can put it together, I glue it up, and then when I go to finish it, I can leave it right on there and turn with it, because this is going to turn freely on the tailstock. So another nice to have for something big, when you're doing something big, especially big and long, is a steady rest. Now I've intended to make one for years. I've even bought the wheels in order to make it work. But I just don't have the time. So when I ordered my new lathe, I ordered their steady rest to come with it. And now this is it here. And what that does is it mounts on the bed of the lathe, and these wheels move out, and then you draw them in so they're just touching whatever the pieces that you're working on the outside of it, on the end that is least supported. And it increases what you can do by a huge amount. If you're doing a nice big vase, you can support it out there and cut the inside without fear of it ripping off the chuck. So after that, there's other goodies you can get, and honestly, the way it's been put to me in the past is, if you really get into it and you buy a lathe, you're not so much buying a lathe as you are a Barbie doll. Because Barbie's got to have the Malibu dream house, she's got to have all the dresses, she's got to have the Corvette, she's got to have this, she's got to have that. Once you get into it, it's very easy to really get into it and and spend some money. But you don't have to, and that's the whole point of this video. As it comes down to it, like I said, the must-haves. You gotta have a lathe. Absolutely a must. You gotta have the safety equipment, a face shield and dust protection. Got to have those. The tools. Again, if you want to turn bowls, you can turn any bowl you want with a bowl gouge, a skew, and a scraper. And if you want to turn spindles, you can turn almost any spindle you want with a skew, a spindle roughing gouge, and a spindle detail gouge. Everything else just adds different aspects to what you can do. The more tools you get, again, you can get a set, and I would again suggest to spend a little bit more money. Don't go for the cheap tools on Amazon, because they're not worth it. They're not going to increase your enjoyment in the craft. It's just going to make you frustrated. Getting something a little bit better and starting with that is what will really whet your appetite. And of course, number 4 on the must-haves is you got to have a method to sharpen. If you don't sharpen your tools, again, you'll be frustrated and you won't enjoy it. As long as you keep a good sharp tool, the enjoyment of turning will be kind of limitless. So after that, again, get yourself a chuck. You could start to build slowly and get the tool set and a lathe that you want. And, just take your time. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. That's the way I've always thought about it. At any rate, this is the way I feel about it, about turning. If you like to discuss any of the things I've had to say, please leave me comments. I answer every one. I promise I do. If you think you've gotten some value out of this video, it's kind of sparked your interest maybe into some of the things you might want to get in order to start turning, please click like and subscribe. I'd appreciate that. And as always, please, everybody, stay safe and have a good day. Bye-bye.